Everybody awake?
Yeah. To be honest. We're here.
Y'all, what's going on? Let's talk. I'm awake?
Gotta find the sunshine on the cloudy day.
Well, we're looking for sunshine on a cloudy day, and it is a cloudy day, and I didn't plan that, and it's not even a nice cloudy day. I mean, yesterday was like wonderful, and I dug out my short sleeve shirt, and somebody said, "You got a Hawaiian shirt?" And I said, "Well, I didn't really think about that as a Hawaiian shirt, but anyhow, close enough, you know." Miss Marie would be happy, except I couldn't. No way could I wear it then. I wore a suit coat and a tie to her funeral, and it was so cold. I wish I had worn a top coat too. I didn't. They wanted to do a graveside funeral, and I felt like you couldn't just do what I normally do at a graveside funeral. I had to do something a little longer, and a couple of the family wanted to share, and by the time we were done, I was so cold I could hardly feel my hands. Anyhow. So it was so nice last night when I went to bed that I thought that I didn't even walk out this morning. I thought I could wear a short sleeve shirt, but when I walked out, I thought, ooh, I should have wore something different. Now that you're awake, a little more because we've interacted. EJ's still sleeping. Look at him. EJ, if I'm glad you're here. Hope you feel better. It won't hurt my feelings if you close your eyes and go to sleep. And we'll know it if you fall out of your chair, so you might want to move in one chair. I'm really looking forward to Saturday, to the youth auction and to God's Kitchen, although I'm not sure I'll be at God's Kitchen, but we need the rest of you to be at God's Kitchen. That's at Grace United Methodist Church. Sign-up sheets are in the back. Please do that. I'm finally ready, Try. You've had me going this whole time? Oh, my goodness. So when we finally get it on the internet, it'll be all that. Somebody will tune in and say, "What's that crazy dude doing?" He trims it. That's good. Because we wouldn't want that, right?
Leave the good jokes.
Good jokes? I haven't told any jokes yet.
Well, we've been laughing, so
Yeah, well, been trying to warm you up and get you awake.
We're not awake yet. We're laughing. It's not even a joke.
Because I have some really important stuff that we need to talk about this morning. We're at the end of our long series of Through the Psalms. I'm not going to go any further than Psalm 145. I'm changing directions next week because we're heading into the Easter season. We're 3 weeks away from Easter, and I want to head in a little different direction. But this is a beautiful psalm on which to end this long psalm series that we've had, and we've had some interruptions and some series in between. So I want to begin this morning with this question. I want to ask you, not necessarily to answer, but I want you to be thinking about this, and I want you to be thinking about it in your own life, because I'm going to talk about our life as a congregation. And there's two tracks here. We have our life as a congregation, and we have your life or my life. Our individual lives separate from our congregational life. So here's the question I want you to think about this morning. Where have you seen God in your life? And I should maybe clarify that. Where have you seen God more recently in your life? Because, we should be looking for God in our lives on a regular basis, and we should be seeing God in our lives on a regular basis. And what I'm asking you to do is to think about those moments where God showed up so big that it left little question in your mind that it was God. That you didn't have to say, "Was that God?" You said, "Wow. Yay, God. I knew it was you." And then also think about, because we don't want to forget these, the little ways that you experience God in your life. Those moments that you have a God encounter that you might not share with others, but you know without a doubt that it was God in your life, and God has been present in your life or in a situation in your life. And like a sister that joins us every Wednesday at Pinehurst, she prays. Always she begins her prayers. And we're thanking you, Lord, for opening our eyes this morning to see the beauty of this day, to be able to breathe in that air and fill our lungs with the breath that you have provided. That's the little ways that we experience God in our lives, all the time, every day. And when you stop experiencing God in that way, you won't know it because you'll be on to something else and something bigger and better. And you'll definitely know that when you get there. Because when you stop breathing and you stop opening your eyes and seeing the light of a new day, you're not in this world any longer. And I think it's beautiful when she prays that. It's just her way of reminding us that God shows up in our lives in little ways and in big ways. And actually, that little way is not really that little when you think about it. We take it for granted. I mean, we don't think about the breath we breathe being a gift from God. Stacy might on a regular basis because she has that apparatus, that machine that helps her be able to take that breath. And it is a huge gift. We wouldn't have Stacy if it weren't for that gift. And so we're grateful for that gift. Grateful for you. Do you ever stop to recall those moments in your life? The big moments, the little moments? If so, great, you should. If not, why not? In this beautiful psalm David wrote, Psalm 145, David says that we should take time to remember those times in our lives, to reflect on those times in our lives, and to proclaim those times in our lives where we have had God encounters. It's a beautiful, beautiful psalm of praise. He begins it by saying, I will exalt you, my God and King, and praise your name forever and ever. I will praise you every day. Yes, I will praise you forever. Great is the Lord. He is most worthy of praise. No one can measure his greatness. And then he says this, and this is the piece I want to focus on this morning, partly. Let each generation tell its children of your mighty acts. Let them proclaim your power. So what he's saying there is that every generation ought to proclaim the mighty acts of God. We ought to tell the generations that follow us. We ought to reflect and remember those moments when we've experienced God in our lives in big ways. And the reason that is because when we have times of struggle, when we're feeling the weight of the world pressing on us, when we feel like God isn't there, when we feel like he's forgotten us, we need to recall those times when we've had God encounters. As Sharon's mom used to say, we need to remember that God has gotten us through all those other times in our lives, and he'll surely get us through this one. That's what David's pushing us to do in this psalm. Let each generation tell its children of your mighty acts. Let them proclaim your power. Your awe-inspiring deeds will be on every tongue, and I will proclaim your greatness, he says. Now, as a congregation, we have had so many great and awesome God encounters in our life as a congregation. I just want to take a moment and recount some of those. And as I'm doing that, I invite you to think about some in your own life. I don't have my thing. There it is. So yesterday in the Camden Community Garden, we had a God moment in our life as a congregation. This thing is driving me crazy. All right. So it doesn't work. Go to the next one. I don't know why it doesn't work in this one. It works in the 9 o'clock. I have somebody back there to push the button. So anyhow, yesterday at the Camden Community Garden, we were supposed to be there from 9 to 11. We were there from 9 to 1:30. We had 27 people, and only one of those 27 people was from any of our churches. And I say that not to shame you. I say that as something to celebrate, because now in our third year, we have engaged this community in a way that it was all the community. It was neighbors I'd met, neighbors I haven't met, there was a person from Delmar who brought his family who wanted to see what it was like because they want to do a garden in Delmar, and he wants to be a part of that there, even though he goes to church just up the street at Asbury United Methodist. He wants one in his town. And then there was a couple from three people from Chrisfield who were coming to learn from us. They have a garden in Chrisfield, but they wanted to learn some of the things that we're doing and see how to strengthen what they're doing. And so they came and worked with us. And it was beautiful. And it's even more beautiful when you realize that on Friday night, I got a text message with 2 pictures, and I should have put those up here, and I didn't, of kids in the garden from Tim Stock and Kate Harris, who have been longtime supporters of us from the beginning, who have decided that they're going to take a deeper involvement in this garden movement this year. They're not going to grow a garden in their backyard, she told me, because they don't have green thumbs. They want to come and learn from us how to garden, and they want to be involved in a way that they can engage the neighbors. And so what they've been doing each day this last week after school, they have a list of things that they can do. They wait at the bus stop, and they invite the kids to come over and help them. And she sent me a picture Friday night of about 6 kids in the garden enjoying it, and she said the caption of the night was, the kids said, "This is more fun than playing on the playground." And some of those very children were with us on Saturday, and they were working hard to help us do all that they could, pushing wheelbarrows. And I was so proud of the adults. They let those children push wheelbarrows that maybe only had 2 shovelfuls of compost in, because that's what the kid could push. And they let them do that for a while until they tired of it. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And this whole garden thing, brothers and sisters, has been a God thing from beginning to end. And I'm going to say a lot about that. And I didn't talk about the garden last week at all. So, it's okay. It's time. I didn't want you to think I forgot about the garden. And I had no idea when we began this garden how much of a God thing it would be or how big it would be. Yesterday, Sharon stayed home and she was working on this scrapbook. I keep pushing her to get this scrapbook done because it's just such a beautiful thing when you see it all in one place. You know, we've been seeing this story unfold for 3 years now. This is the 3rd season. But when you put it all in a place and you can flip through it in a matter of minutes and see the impact and the progress and what God has done, it's amazing, absolutely amazing. And I just am in awe of God. And God has not only been involved in this congregation's life through the garden, but God has been involved in this congregation's life beyond the garden and even before the garden movement. So in 2007, we purchased this building. I think, is that the next picture? No. So go to the next picture. I got ahead of myself. And I don't know why. Anyhow. So I'll go back to the garden movement. This garden thing is more than just our little garden on Camden Community. This was online. WMDT came to the community garden that we established at the Hazel Center, the Salvation Army Hazel Center out on Jersey Road. And this was the headline of their article, Volunteers Plant Community Gardens. Volunteers came out to help plant gardens for parts of the community. Martin Hutchinson, named Secretary of Gardens by City Mayor Jake Day, came out on a tractor to help with. And then it showed this picture of supposedly me with a deep suntan, driving a red tractor. And that reporter is new to the job and needs to learn his job a little better. I'm grateful that he came out, but he got it really wrong in terms of all of that. I was not there. I was at Camden Community Garden. I would never, ever, ever, ever ride a red tractor. Never. It would be green and yellow or I wouldn't get on it. And beyond that, if you recall, we never had a tractor at the Camden Community Garden, and our very first year, Brent Johnson offered his tractor to come and put the soil in the beds, and I said, absolutely not. If you do that, we will not have community engagement. We won't have community investment. We need to shovel that soil. So we shoveled 6 dump truck loads of soil, big dump truck loads. Yesterday, we shoveled almost 2 dump truck loads of compost, and we shoveled, I don't know how many dump truck loads of wood chips we put in the garden last year, but every bit of it has been shoveled by hand because we need community engagement, community investment in this process. And so I saw that, and I'm grateful that they came, and I hope it gives a bump to this garden. But I thought, wow, it's not us. But what it did do is it put us on the map again. It put us out in front of people, because it went on to say that it was a part of the Community of Joy Church that this garden began. And we did. Church of the Brethren, Global Food Crisis Initiative, gave us money that we used to provide the soil of the Salvation Army Hazel Center garden. And then I found 2 people that have been monitoring that. In addition, the next picture, I think, shows you at the Boundless Garden yesterday. They had these children out in that community garden, and that's on the kind of north side of town, the Newtown Historical District. And those kids are very engaged in this process, as you can see, doing what they can to spread compost that we provided. Next picture shows the back to the Hazel Center. Those are the children on Friday pulling up the vegetables. They have turnips in their hands, and they then went inside, and the lady there, Mary Mazzullo, and Corliss Thornton, who's standing in the back, they fixed those turnips and let the kids eat them, and they enjoyed it. And it was a highlight of their day. And it just makes my heart sing. And the other thing you got to know about this whole God movement in the garden is that the money that we spent yesterday on this compost came from Old Town Deli customers in the first month and a half through their tip jar. They gave us almost $700. August and the half of August and the first and September of last year, their tip jars was almost $700 that they gave us. We're in their tip jars again, March through September. And it's just incredible, and was wonderful to be able to provide 21 cubic yards of compost, quality compost, for 3 community gardens yesterday through that. So now I think I'm at yes. So God has been involved in this congregation's life in huge ways beyond the garden. If you haven't recognized that picture, that is this place, that is Tri, standing right here behind what is now that was their pulpit. We took the top off and redid it, refinished it, but it's our coffee service area back there in the back. That's what their pulpit was. And that is the inside of this space where you are right now, that we purchased in 2007 from a church that owned this. And our last offer to them was $375,000 in 2007 for this building. They countered our offer, and Emma's just buying a house tomorrow. And Emma, it didn't work this way for you, did it? Okay. So they countered our offer of $375,000 with $360,000. Anybody buy a house like that? No. $15,000 less was their counteroffer than what we offered them. We offered them $375,000, and they said, no, we'll take $360,000. That's God. And I'm telling you that today because I want you to remember these moments where God shows up in our life. And some of you weren't around then, and you don't know that if we didn't tell you that. And I'll tell you when you get old enough to remember this too, Aaron. Because that's what David is saying. Tell the children. Let each generation tell its children of God's mighty acts. And we got to do this so we can remember it. Easter of that year, 2007, our congregation was 43 people in size. Men, women, children. We announced 1 week prior to Easter, on Palm Sunday, we announced that we were going to take an offering to buy this building, and we wanted everybody to give as much as they could, and then we wanted them to make a commitment for 2 years to pay on our mortgage. Our mortgage was $1,480, let's say, something like that. And that Sunday, with 1 week's notice, our 43 people with lots of children gave $125,000 over our regular offering and made a commitment for 2 years to pay the mortgage of $1,480 over their regular giving. And then we had, a little while later, we needed an additional offering to do some of the remodeling. We did $70,000 worth of remodeling in this building to get it ready for us to be used. It has the same floor. All of this is new. The wall surface is new. The windows is new. The heating system's new. The plumbing's new. The electrical's new. All of that, the ramp, all of that wasn't here, and God provided that. And that is a huge way we have encountered God in this congregation's life. And that all was God's first move to get us into this neighborhood, which is the foundation of the story that God has been building on ever since. That very first year, we did what we called Joy Fest. But we didn't call it Joy Fest then. We're calling it Joy Fest now. We called it Pork Roast. And we went door to door in 4 different quadrants for 4 years and invited our neighbors to come. Because when we bought this property, this neighborhood was in the news all the time, and it wasn't good. It was bad. It was political. It was political infighting. It was this and that, and it was just bad, bad, bad. And so we said, we want to be a force for good. We want to be positive. We want to bless others. So we invited them, no strings attached, to a pork roast that we had outside. And we've had it most years that we've been here, except we suspended it. One year it rained out, and then one year we didn't do it, and now we're going to do it on April 30th this year instead of in the fall. We're kind of coming back to it, except we're calling it Joy Fest. And then somewhere in that time frame, 2008, we became faith-based partners with Pinehurst Elementary School, which is our local elementary school right down the street. And it's a neat thing that our county allows. They allow churches to be partners with schools. And when I tell pastors in other states that we have that ability, they're like, what? Really? How do I get that? And I said, well, it's really a cool thing. And so we have been encouraging and blessing and supporting the teachers and staff and students of Pinehurst Elementary School since 2008. We've been praying at their school for the first day of school for a number of years now. The way it used to be is we'd go over there quietly and pray in their parking lot on the Sunday before school started. And then one year we went on the day of school and we invited them to come. And then the next thing I know, the vice principal was saying, would you come and do a see you at the pole? And so we did that one year. And then this last year when we went there to do the prayer time on the first day of school, they said, will you come in and pray every Wednesday in our gymnasium? And so every Wednesday at 8 o'clock, I meet with 10 to 20 staff from the school, always a different group of people, to pray. And when I tell pastors we do that, they're like, what? In a public school? You do? Really? Huh? How's that? I said, they invited us. See, God's laying this foundation and this story that we're building on in huge ways here, and it's incredible. On Monday of this past week, we provided them an abundant lunch. We had way too much food. Thank you for all of you who gave. And the registered dietitian will be engaged in her services next time. But Pastor Sharon and I just blew it. I told Pastor Sharon it was too many staff, and we figured on too much food per person. So we brought we're going to have a fellowship event soon where we have tacos, because we have lots of tacos. But I'm telling you what, they loved it. They absolutely loved it. And if you didn't see the note, back on the bulletin board, there's a note, thank you note, inside both, and then flip it over and you can see on the back. And many of the staff took the time to write a little note, not just to sign their name. It's beautiful. We came away that day not only with excess lunch that we didn't need or use, but we also came away with 4 boxes of food, 4 boxes and a bag of food for 50K souls that they gave us, canned goods. It was all a surprise. And last Sunday, if you were here in the 10:30 service, you saw that we had a whole row. We had 9 people from the staff and teachers from Pinehurst were here just because they wanted to support us. And on Wednesday, when I went this week, the principal said, I just loved your service. Now, she goes to a church, I know. She said, I loved your message, and I really loved your praise team. She said those songs that they sing and the way they sang, it was just wonderful. She said, we had a great time. That's a God thing, brothers and sisters. And David says, let each generation tell its children of God's mighty acts and let them proclaim God's power. We need to tell these stories because we need to be reminded that when life isn't going as well as it could, or we wish it would, or when we're feeling the weight and the heaviness of the burdens of the world, that God has shown up and will continue to show up in our lives over and over again because He is faithful. Yesterday and Friday, Pete Layfield, who's I'd say he's probably in his 70s, retired farmer in the community, kind of struggles to have a lot of income, so he's doing this compost thing. He brought 5 loads, 21 cubic yards of compost to the gardens that would have, at the price I've been paying personally for it in my garden, I've been using his compost for 5 years. He charges me $55 a scoop, which is the Bobcat bucket. It's a cubic yard. And that would be $1,155 that he was going to charge for the 21 cubic yards I needed for these. So he said, I'm going to cut you a deal. And he said, my deal is going to be $30 a scoop. So it'd be $630, and I won't charge you delivery. He had to make 5 trips to our community gardens with this big old dump truck. And then he got part of them on Friday and part of them yesterday. I'm telling you this story because it's a yay God moment, and it even gets better after I told it at the 9 o'clock, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. So he called me yesterday afternoon at 3:30 in the afternoon. The only load he had left was to bring it personally to me, to my garden, and he said, my truck broke down, and I'm not going to be able to get there. I have your stuff loaded. I'm on Mount Herman Road. Luckily, I could get it off of the road, and I'm calling a tow truck to come get me and tow it to this guy that I bought it from so we can see what's wrong with it. And I said, oh, Pete, I said, I'm so sorry. Do you need a ride from where you tow it to your house? And he said, I don't know, but I might. Can I call you if I do? Well, I didn't get that was 3:30. I didn't get a call, and it was like 10 after 5 when my phone rang, and it was Pete. And we're here getting ready to get set up for the family movie night, which was a great time, thanks to the fellowship team and Andrea. It was beautiful, and so I had to leave because I had made this promise and so I went to where he'd had the truck towed. And by the time I got there, they had figured out that nothing was wrong with it. It had run out of gas. The gas gauge didn't work, and he didn't know it. And so it was out of gas, and the guy who had it said, if you go across the street, it was right across from the Nutters Crossing Exxon station or Sunoco station, and he said, if you go across the street with this 5-gallon gas can that I'll give you, you can put gas in it and you can get home. So Pete said, well, I don't have any money. I said, I got money. He said, oh, no, I don't want to do that. He said, can you take me home and I get money? He said, no, I got money. I said, you haven't charged us for any of these deliveries. All this gas has run out delivering my product, and you've given us a great rate, $630 versus $1,155. I said, I got money. I got it cared for. So I went over and we filled the 5-gallon thing, and we came back and put it in the truck, and it started right up, and we drove it over there, and I said, Pete, I want you to go over there, and I'm going to fill your gas tank. He said, no, Pastor Martin, I can't let you do that. He said, I am really eager to help you, and I'm glad I'm helping you because I'm trying to get my life right with the Lord. I've made a promise that I'm going to straighten my life out, and I'm going to follow the Lord's path for my life. And I said, Pete, I'm delighted that you're making that path, that you've made that decision, and you're on that path. And I said, I want to fill this up, and I don't want you to pay me back. I said, I want it. I want to do it as a way to bless you because God has blessed us immensely. I have lots of money in this garden fund, and $630 plus. I think I paid $80 to fill his tank, counting the 5 gallons that we It's like, it's not near what I would have paid at market value, and I'm happy to do it. And I said, beside, you have a $120 tow bill that you have to pay on top of this because you ran out of gas and you didn't know it. And he said, well, that was my stupidity. And I said, well, this is just the way God works. God blesses us so we can bless others. And he said, man, I am so thankful. And he welled up with tears and was just, you could tell he was just touched. And he's going to be even more touched because after I shared that story at the 9 o'clock, someone came up to me and said, $120 is what it costs, right? I said, yes. If I write a check, can you make sure he gets the $120? I said, absolutely. I said, write it out to the garden fund. That way you can get tax credit, and we'll send him a check and I'm going to tell him this story. And he's going to be so touched. But that's how God is. That's how God works. And that's what we have to do. We have to tell one another these stories of ways we've encountered God. That's what the psalmist, that's what David is telling us to do. Absolutely beautiful. It says, let each generation tell its children of God's mighty acts and let them proclaim God's power. You see why we've got to do that. We've got to remind each other of these stories. And hopefully you've been thinking of some personal encounters that you've had with God. Because the more we remind ourselves, the more they're there when we're struggling, when we're overwhelmed, when we're burdened down, when we're in our pits. You see, the essence of worship is celebration of God. And David says in this psalm, we need to celebrate God every day, forever and ever. Then he moves on to this beautiful section, verses 8 through 13. He says, the Lord is merciful and compassionate, slow to get angry and filled with unfailing love. The Lord is good to everyone. He showers compassion on all his creation. All of your works will thank you, Lord, and your faithful followers will praise you. They will speak of the glory of your kingdom. They will give examples of your power. They will tell about your mighty deeds and about the majesty and glory of your reign. For your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. You rule throughout all generations. The Lord always keeps his promise. He is gracious in all he does. That's absolutely a beautiful description of God and what God does in our lives and through our lives. Now, I read this somewhere this week, and it was not attributed to anybody, but they said a day without praise is like a day without sunshine. And I thought, how true. That's why I titled my sermon, Finding Sunshine on a Cloudy Day. Because when we're experiencing a cloudy day, that's when we need to be looking for where God is in the midst of our lives. And a day without praise is indeed like a day without sunshine. Marie Shores, who we had her funeral on Thursday, used to always say to me whenever she would talk about some marvelous, magnificent thing that God has done, if I would tell her a story like I just told you some of these stories, she would always proclaim, the Lord works in mysterious ways his wonders to perform. And she'd say that all the time. Now, I said that in the early service, and other people said, yeah, we've heard that before. I never heard it before. The only person I ever heard that from was from Marie. And she said it all the time. And I always would say, indeed, indeed, indeed. The Lord works in mysterious ways and his wonders to perform. Let each generation, David says, let each generation tell its children of God's mighty acts. We got to. Partly because you know as well as I do that life isn't always wonderful, great God moments, yay God moments. We experience life as a collection of moments that sometimes are filled with heavy burdens and are difficult. And in this beautiful psalm, David encourages us when we find that life is overwhelming or we're burdened down. And he gives us 4 pieces of encouragement to put into practice when we find the weight of life is so burdensome and overwhelming to us. I want to lead you into those as we look at what David says. In verse 14, David writes, the Lord helps the fallen and lifts those bent beneath their loads. So what he's saying is that God helps us when we're burdened with life, when we're overwhelmed. And then he goes on in the next several verses, next 6 verses, he lifts out 4 ways that we can respond when we're struggling, when we're overwhelmed, when we're feeling burdened by life. And I want to say, before I lead you into those 4, that our congregation's life hasn't always been a bed of roses. We've had some struggles in the past 18 years. Sharon and I have been here 18 years. In 2006, in the fall, those of us who were here were really excited about this property that we thought God was providing us, Robbins Avenue. And those of you who are around know that we held a gathering there, a prayer time. We walked all through that church building. We thought God was giving us that. And then days, weeks later, the carpet got pulled out from underneath of us, and it sent us in a spiraling downward moment. We lost people. We lost momentum. We lost energy. It was a deflating time in the life of this congregation. It was a difficult time. And yet, David encourages us in those moments in life when we're struggling to do 4 things. And these are the 4 things he encourages us. In verse 15, he says, "The eyes of all who look to you in hope, you give them their food as they need it." So what verse 15 is saying is look up. You know what happens when we feel weighed down, overwhelmed, when we feel like we're in a pit? We just hang our head. We look down. When we feel overwhelmed or dejected or burdened, we look down. We don't look up. And we need to look up. We need to look for God. Look for where God is in the midst of our lives. Just this week, I was talking to a friend who was struggling with the reality of some things that was going on in their lives. And I just kept saying, look up, look up, look up. Because that's what we need to do. It's not the natural reaction. The natural reaction when we're overwhelmed is to look down and to pull in. But we need to look up and lift our hands and be in praise of God, because a day without praise is like a day without sunshine. So when you feel overwhelmed and burdened by the weight of the world, look up. Secondly, David says in verse 18, he says, "The Lord is close to all who call on him, yes, to all who call on him." So in addition to looking up, call to him. Pray. It's so simple, we shouldn't have to say it, but sometimes when we're feeling the weight of the world on us, we don't think about praying. It's the very time we should pray. It's not the only time we should pray. I mean, David's saying, recall those times and give thanks and praise God for the ways he's been involved in your life. So when you're overwhelmed with life and weighed down, look up and call on God. Thirdly, in verse 19, he says, he grants the desires of those who fear him. He hears their cries for help and rescues them. So we circle back to praise. And in this case, as I said last week, fear is not about being afraid of. It's about worshiping. It's about reverencing. It's about revering. It's about being in awe of God. A day without praise is like a day without sunshine. So when you're feeling down, worship God. Look up, call on God, pray, and worship God. And fourthly, in verse 20, David says, the Lord protects all who love him, but he destroys the wicked. So look up, call out, worship God, and love God. Know that God is sovereign and in control. God hasn't left his throne. He's not going to leave you in that pit. He's not going to leave you in that weighed down, burdensome state. God has been there in the past. God will be there in the present. Look up, call out, worship God, love God. Don't give in to the weight of the burden. Brothers and sisters, I stand before you today as a testimony to this reality. About 4 years ago, before this garden thing became a reality, I was done. I was tired of ministry. I've told you this before. I was ready to get out. But by looking up, by calling out, by worshiping God, and by loving God, this whole garden movement began. And now I'm engaged and loving it. And each door that God opens is just more testimony to His goodness and greatness, and is more making us aware, making this community aware of who Community of Joy is and the beauty of you and what you're about as you live out your life as children of God. So David says, let each generation tell its children of God's mighty acts, and when the clouds are thick, look up, call out, worship God, love God, and you will find sunshine on a cloudy day. So how do you want to interact today? What ways, stories do you want to personally share of encounters you've had with God that have been yay God moments?